End of August, the beginning of September 2020, there was at least one more missed opportunity to save the life of Star Hobson, but this should be the last, as she was in the final weeks of her life, which, like half of her short time on this earth, would be characterised by fear and sadistic physical abuse, eventually ending with her being beaten to death. On the 27th of August 2020, Star was being looked after by a family friend, and they took a video of her face, which showed clear bruising, as well as what appeared to be finger marks. This video was sent to Star's maternal uncle Benjamin Smith and paternal great-grandfather Frank Smith. Ben immediately called West Yorkshire Police, who went to speak to Smith, but she avoided them. When she spoke to officers on the phone, she said that she, Brockhill and Star were in Scotland, an obvious lie, which they didn't look into, and this wasn't followed up. It took a couple of days for Frank to see the video, and when he did see it, on the 2nd of September, he immediately called social services. This was the 5th and final referral, the last opportunity to save Star's life. The social worker called Smith, and she simply stated that Star had injured herself when she fell over. At 11 AM on the 4th of September 2020, the social worker went to visit the flat. They hadn't seen the video of the bruises on Star's face, or even pictures of these injuries. The social worker saw Star, Smith and Brockhill, and they noted that both women had a good bond with the child, and they had no concerns. In fact, Smith and Brockhill were spinning their lies, claiming that Frank, the great-grandfather, was a homophobe, and that his allegations were simply because he didn't approve of their relationship. On the 15th of September 2020, just 7 days before Star's death, social services closed their case on the basis that concerns raised by Frank were malicious. Just 2 days before the case was closed, on Sunday the 13th of September 2020, Star would suffer a vicious assault, which would mean that she spent her last days alive in excruciating pain. On this date, because Frankie Smith wanted to go out drinking, Savannah Brockhill was left in charge of Star, but she also had to go to work. She couldn't find anyone else to look after Star, and so she took her to a night shift as a security guard at the Eco Power recycling plant in Rossington, near Doncaster. Her arriving at the plant was captured on CCTV. What has not been released, but what the jury later had to watch, was Brockhill returning to the car repeatedly over the space of 3 hours and assaulting Star approximately 21 times, including slapping and punching her in the face and punching her body, as well as grabbing her. At one point, Star fell out of the car and was thrown back in by Brockhill. All during this time, Brockhill and Smith were arguing via text. It's no coincidence that Star was suffering the consequences of the toxic relationship between the pair. The next morning, Star was returned to the care of Smith, and police found that she'd taken a photo of a large bruise on her daughter's face, and there had been a back and forward argument between her and Brockhill, where Smith said, quote, "Stay away from us." Of course this wouldn't last. This was just part of a pattern with this toxic relationship. The bruise on Star's face was the least of her injuries. It's likely that the savage assault she was subjected to on the 13th of September resulted in many of the injuries found at her autopsy, including a broken leg, broken ribs, and damage to her internal organs. Frankie Smith and Savannah Brockhill's pathetic and childish relationship continued, constant arguing, phone calls morning, noon and night. It's clear both were dependent on each other. Sickeningly, they continued to bond over their apparent hatred of Star. On Saturday the 19th of September 2020, Smith took a video of Star, who had a broken leg and internal injuries, stood in a corner, apparently as punishment. She was sending messages disparaging her little girl to Brockhill, who responded saying, quote, "She's a very nasty and naughty child," and "She's a brat who thinks nothing of you." The next day, Sunday the 20th of September 2020, CCTV was captured of Frankie Smith dragging Star around Bradford City Centre on her reins. Star was struggling to walk because of her broken leg and was having difficulty keeping her head upright. At one point, Star fell over and was dragged off the floor by Smith, who held her like a puppet on strings. Star Hobson would have been in excruciating pain from head to toe. Smith later said in court that she had no idea her daughter was in pain and believed she was just having a tantrum. What happened on the afternoon of Tuesday the 22nd of September 2020, the day Star Hobson died, will never be known for sure. What is known is that at 2:54 PM, Savannah Brockhill parked her vehicle in the car park outside the flat in Weston Place on Halifax Road in Kiley, and Frankie Smith came to meet her before they were seen walking back towards the door into the complex. In the flat were 3 children, Star and 2 others. It's not clear who the other children were, but what is known is that one of them was a little boy, aged around 2.5, and they were there for a play date. Soon after entering the property, Savannah Brockhill launched a final vicious assault against 16-month-old Star Hobson. Brockhill kicked and punched Star, as well as lightly stamping on her over and over again. Brockhill fractured her skull and broke more of her ribs. It was later stated that the injuries that Star sustained were delivered with a massive amount of force, and they were similar to those someone would sustain in a serious car crash. Star also suffered a laceration measuring 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters to her inferior vena cava, the main blood vessel taking blood back to the heart. This caused massive internal injuries. Star Hobson bled to death. At autopsy, it was found that 50% of her circulating blood was found to have leaked into her abdomen. The fatal punch or kick which caused the injury also damaged Star's internal organs, including her liver, pancreas and kidneys. While Star lay dying, at 3:34 p.m, Brockhill was searching on the internet. She typed in, quote, "shocking babies" and how to bring a baby out of shock. Clearly she was hoping she could find some magic remedy which would mean that this evil pair could simply patch up Star, continue to get away with their crimes and use her as a punching bag. But this time, there would be no saving Star. She was on the brink of death. The timeline is important to point out, as it shows that within 30 minutes of arriving at the property, Brockhill had beaten Star to death. The reason for this savage beating has never been revealed, but Brockhill's internet searches and messages between her and Smith give one likely scenario. 4 days before the murder, Frankie Smith was complaining to Savannah Brockhill that Star had apparently ripped up a concert ticket signed by Alan Williams, a member of the Rubettes band, which she'd been obsessed with since she was a child. At 3:03 p.m. on the day of the murder, 9 minutes after she arrived, Brockhill searched for a replacement autograph ticket online. So I think what potentially happened was that Brockhill turned up, Smith immediately began talking about the autograph ticket her daughter had ripped up. This, to these sick women, was not the act of a little girl who was likely just playing. This was a sign of Star's evil, how much of a brat she was. Brockhill then looked for a replacement ticket online, and likely began berating Star, before savagely beating her. So potentially, Star was murdered because of a ripped up ticket. After delaying for around 11 minutes, Savannah Brockhill finally called the emergency services, having quickly come up with a weak cover story to explain away the numerous injuries which covered the body of Star Hobson. See if you can spot the obvious red flags on this call, and just how evil she is.